right, so welcome everybody. My name is Sky Kirshner. I'm with KPCC Counseling in Charleston. And this is the first in a little series of conversations around parenting, foster-adoptive kinship, parenting dilemmas and challenges. And on the call, we have Dina Shelton, Marissa Sanders, and Stacy Jacks. And I'll invite each of them to give an introduction about themselves. I also want to do a shout out to the West Virginia Council of Churches, Jeff Allen there, and also the Benedum Foundation, which is offering its support for this, this little initiative. Let's start with Dina Shelton. Go ahead, Dina.
My name is Dina Shelton. I am the Assistant Director for Counseling Programs at the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. I am a licensed professional counselor supervisor in Texas and an approved clinical supervisor. I am also an adoptive parent and work extensively in East Texas with our adoptive and foster network.
Yeah, thank you, Dina. And Irvine, California is where the Concordia is, and we're thrilled to have you. And just how did you get on this call? Well, Dina and I were talking, and I found out she does this whole podcast around parenting and adoptive and foster parenting. And I thought she would be a great partner for this. Let's send it over to Marissa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Sanders, and I'm the Executive Director of the West Virginia Foster-Adoptive and Kinship Parents Network. And we focus mostly on peer support and advocacy for foster, adoptive, and kinship parents throughout the state. And we're excited to be part of this project and make sure that people have information and resources available to them.
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. And Stacy.
Hi, my name is Stacy. My name is Stacy Jakes, and this is Hope Jakes. And I am a foster adoptive kinship biological parent. I've done all of them. I'm also an attorney for the state of West Virginia. I've been a CASA, guardian ad litem, and most importantly for the purposes of this call and probably for my life is I work with the West Virginia Foster-Adoptive Kinship Parents Network. I am the support group coordinator, and I do a few other things that need done.
Well, Stacy, triple threat, triple header, fantastic. It's so great to have all of this brain power and experience and wisdom on the call. And so Marissa and Stacy, we were talking a little bit beforehand about just what the terminology is in terms of parent, adoptive parent, resource parent. Tell us a little bit about the challenges of that.
So, and I forgot to mention, I am a former foster, now adoptive parent. So speaking of terminology, yeah, it gets confusing. In some states, they use the term resource parent to kind of refer to everyone, or at least to foster and kinship parents. But in West Virginia, that term's not really reused. So when we're talking, typically when you're talking about a foster parent, it's someone who's certified through an agency, who's had some training before they have kids placed with them, and they, generally speaking, the children who would be placed with them are not known to them prior to them coming to their home. They're not relatives or kids that they've known. Kinship families sometimes are already foster families, but usually they are someone that the child knows or is related to, and they often have children come to live with them before they've had any training or any real information about how the system works, or what to expect. Sometimes they get training, sometimes they don't, depending on kind of the circumstances after the kids come to them.
So they're just there in a crisis. They're ready to step up and asked to step up, and they've said yes, and they're doing what they need to do to help this kid.
Right. And with kinship, sometimes it is that the state has placed the child with them, but then we have, in West Virginia, we have tons and tons of what we refer to as sort of informal kin, which are families who usually don't have any involvement with the state, but or with Children's Child Protective Services, but have the kids come to live with them anyway. Oftentimes that's grandparents. Sometimes it's aunts or uncles or others who just step in to help out without any formal system involvement or support. And then adoptive families are, and that includes families who have legal guardianship, but maybe haven't formally adopted, but are families who have, the kids have reached a permanency arrangement with that family. Whether they were started out as kinship or foster, either one could end up as adoptive.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
and one of the things we often find with adoptive families is that a lot of the support and the monitoring and the case management that you had as a foster or kinship family just disappears as soon as the adoption is final. So a lot of adoptive families continue to need support.
Yeah. And it's so complicated, and there's so many different layers and levels to this. And let's get right into it. And by the way, I'm a lowly regular parent. I have a very little experience in this, except regarding kids and development and attachment kinds of thinking. So let's jump right in. And each of these different kinds of parenting has its own challenges connected to it. You've got Stacy. I know you announced that in less than half an hour you're having a site visit, an unannounced site visit coming to your house, and that's part of the deal, depending on what level you're at. And you have rules that different agencies require you, and so there are a lot of moving parts to this. Let's see if we can just kind of get a couple of specific. Are there any universal problems that are common to all these different kinds of parenting? And Dina, let me throw this over to you to maybe get the ball rolling. I know on your podcast you have dozens and dozens of podcasts around parenting challenges. And what would you say are the commonalities of the parenting challenges, and what might be some of the specifics?
Sure. Thanks so much, Sky. In my personal experience and in my research experience, there's a few things that I've seen that tend to be fairly common across all types of parenting children who are coming to you from difficult situations. Some of those being that a primary goal, and all parents know this as children are coming into your home, whether they're kinship or foster or adoptive, the primary goal is to create stability and connection as quickly as possible. And the moment that child is placed with you is the moment that needs to start. And that's also the moment where the parent's entire world gets turned upside down and their home gets turned upside down again, especially if there are other children in the house and that may reactivate trauma or issues as well. And so it's an imbalance of the system and a requirement for more stability and balance. So these things are playing against one another when it's happening. And so that is something that I have heard from parents across all of these types of family systems. Another is just the internal battle and frustration of parents.
Dina, can I slow you down just a little bit? So when we talk about systems, what we're talking about are patterns, frequently behavior patterns that the members of the family find themselves getting into. Is that one of the meanings of systems?
Yes, absolutely. And when I said systems, and I was specifically referring to the family system, all of the players in the family that engage together to make that family work. And so it can be other children too, but definitely the parents who run the system and design the system for how family works in that home and in that area. And so when the new kid is invited into that, there's a disruption there because everyone has to change to accommodate. And the desire is to create stability for the child as quickly as possible. So it's pretty counterintuitive. It feels that way early on.
Yeah. So an easy example of this would be, where do people sit at the table, like the dinner table or at the Thanksgiving table, or who has Thanksgiving in your family, and what happens if if you have brothers and sisters and one of them gets married or one of them gets divorced. That upsets the system because now you have a new place at the table, or it might upset the system. The system might be able to be very flexible and just there's an obvious place at the table. We've got three ends on a square table, and so here's an empty place, and so you get to sit here. But if the table's already pretty full, where is that person going to sit? How are the people around? How are the other people going to adjust? Do they adjust willingly, or do they adjust unwillingly to that new person coming in? And what a great way to put this out, Dina. So you've got a system that's kind of operating. You're bringing a new person into the system, maybe without much warning. And one of the needs of that new person is stability and connection. And already the system is in disarray because this new person has come in and everybody has to now make adjustments. Am I kind of getting the flavor of that?
You are, and I can give you a
Absolutely.
concrete example of that, which is the 4-year-old that's on the call with me right now, because she was the bio child, and we suddenly had a 4-week-old foster child, and she needed some extra mommy time today. So she's working with mommy today because she needed a little bit. The system got upset, and everybody in the system needed a little bit of reassurance that they were still important in the system.
Yeah, that's really well said, Stacy. And you didn't have like a 9-month pregnancy for her to get ready and excited about this. How much lead time did you have to prepare her that she was going to have to share a mommy?
Less than a day. I think she went off to the babysitters and then came home and there was a new baby.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So yeah, it was not a whole lot of preparing.
I love the way you're smiling as you say this, because I'm sure, I mean, of course, all parents in this thing have massively open hearts and are doing this incredibly loving thing. And at the same time, it's going to put stress on the system. Dina, I just wanted to fill that in case folks were unfamiliar with the idea of the word system. So I hope I didn't completely disrupt your train of thought there.
No, not at all. I think that was so important. And Stacy, I'm glad you jumped in, because I was going to say, I bet Stacy has a really good example of this. Because as you bring children in and out, each situation is very different, and everyone, we teach system theory and counseling and psychology, and we teach it like a baby mobile. And if you look at it, and all of the pieces off of the baby mobile, and you turn it on, you pull one of them and everything moves until everything starts to slow down and counterbalance. And that's what families tend to do when something is disrupted. Everybody has to adjust and push against it and move so that it comes to a balance again. And every time a new child enters the house and every time a foster child leaves, there's this rebalancing act that happens. And that is a process for a family every single time. And I love, Stacey, that you brought up about your daughter, because sometimes it's missed that the other children in the house are part of that system and also have to wait and balance those processes.
Yeah, and different people in the family will sometimes take predictable roles, right? There will be one who clamors for attention. And then there will be another who sometimes is called the lost child, who kind of gives up and says, well, I just can't compete with all these people. I'm just going to get into my cell phone or mom's iPad or whatever. And Dina, I'm guessing that just the awareness of how normal it is that the system is going to be upset and that this is going to be adjustment for everybody. Is that part of how you help folks to manage the stress of this, to just be consciously aware of it?
Absolutely. There's this phenomenon that I see with families, especially with kids coming in and out and disruption in our systems, that the foster and adoptive parents have a big weight on them as the responsible people to create safety and security for everyone. And so it can be very disruptive internally to them when their biological children or other adopted or foster children in the house are also having a lot of difficulty with all of the transitions. And it can turn into internal messages of not being good enough at this, being a failure, especially if there's not an understanding and tolerance that this is a difficult process. And it's also a very normal rearranging process that happens with this. And it can be done in a very healthy way, a much more healthy way, especially with accepting it and recognizing it and embracing that things are hard, and we can say, this is hard for all of us, and be together in it without necessarily having to blame ourselves or create an issue even bigger than the transition in and of itself, and move into areas of self-doubt, or am I good enough for this child? Can I give this child what they need? And on and on.
Marissa, anything to add to this idea of the system getting upset when at the same time the kid who's coming in, well, and everybody, but the kid who's coming in is probably in a particular need for stability and connection?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm glad we clarified when we're talking about the system in this conversation, we mean the family system, because oftentimes when foster, adoptive, and kinship parents are talking about the system, they mean CPS and the agency and the state and the judges and the, all of those kind of things, the foster care system. But I think it's really valuable to think about the family system and how it is impacted by kids coming in and out. And I mean, Stacy and I have had some conversations recently about the impact on biological kids, especially when they're young, and explaining that, this child isn't your brother forever at this point, or your sister forever, and may not be here. We don't know how long they'll be here. And helping them understand that. And even for my son to understand that, there's new kids at Stacy's house, but we don't know how long they'll be there. And he doesn't live there, but for him to, so even thinking of the system as being, the family system as being beyond just the people in the home, but also that extended family, like you talked about, Thanksgiving, your friends that you spend a lot of time with, your, child care providers, all those other people that you interact with regularly, schools, and how that impacts kind of all of the ripple effect as it goes out from the family.
Yeah. And let's think for a minute about the different kinds of systems there are, and it might be useful to think about how these things get created, because usually it's very informally, like it's I know if you've got two kids and you bring a third kid in, now the question is who gets the window seat when you're in the car, right? And so that's going to be maybe a source of a problem. And different parents are going to manage that challenge in different ways. So some parents are going to be very structured, and some parents are going to be very informal and let the kids work it out, or let the biggest one kind of, so what kind of, if you have three kids, what's the system for who gets shotgun, who gets the window seat? Is it based on the first one who calls it? These are all examples of systems, and they get started sort of informally. They just kind of happen. And then once they happen 2 or 3 times or 4 times in a row, it becomes what we call a system, because that's what people now are tending to be used to. And you'll notice it if somebody takes the seat, or if a younger kid, like who got bullied out of the window seat, now tries to get the window seat, like there's going to be conflict, because the system, and somebody's probably going to say, hey, that's my seat, or that's my thing, right? Because that's where I sat last time. Dina, Hold
on, Sky, can I interrupt you with that?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Try adding in different kids who are not only different ages, but different intellectual ages and the same physical age, or different physical sizes and the same age.
Yes.
Like I have 3 13-year-olds and a 14-year-old right now, but developmentally the 14-year-old is 5 and one of the 13-year-olds is 13 and one of the 13-year-olds is 10, but they're all the same size.
So how do you manage that? Do you provide a lot of structure to kind of, like, do you take a leadership role with that, or do you step back and let them work it out themselves? What happens?
I tend to provide a lot of structure. I don't tend to let them work it out themselves, because when you let them work it out themselves, the dominant personality almost always wins. And a new foster child often doesn't feel comfortable being the dominant personality.
Oh, okay.
So you have to make sure everybody is comfortable. Right now with the 3 teenagers, the one who gets car sick gets to sit in the front seat.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
Some things naturally work themselves out,
Right. And then maybe another kid sees, oh, if I'm sick, I get preference. And then they decide, well, maybe I'll see if I can play with that. We did have that issue.
The 13-year-old got hurt, and the 14-year-old who has the emotionality of a 5-year-old decided she needed to go to the doctor too, because she was hurt too, because,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, that's a great way to get attention.
So you have to treat the actual injury in the 13-year-old, but you can't say to the 14-year-old, no, you don't have an injury, you're making that up, because in her mind, it's very real.
Yeah.
And so the whole system is not just about age and size and longevity. It's all really a balancing of everything.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It's so complicated. Plus you have kids coming in who are used to very maybe rigid systems or maybe very chaotic systems. You know, maybe nobody fed them. You know, they were backpack kids. And so now they're coming into a system where there's more structure, and they're not going to, they might love that, but they also might have trouble with it. Dina, I think at this point in the conversation, we might do a little breakaway and just do a little thing about the difference between rigid, chaotic, and more flexible systems. And so just a little 5-minute teaching thing, but let's say we've done that and now we've come back. Do you want to add anything more about just that idea of systems and kind of how a kid gets introduced to this, how the family gets introduced to a kid who's coming in? What if you're bringing 2 or 3 kids in and they've got their own system? I see Marissa nodding, right? So now they've got a system of their own.
I think one of the most important things about that is we could go into several different aspects about what happens when 1 kid or 2 kids comes in. The picture that we see painted and what foster and adoptive parents, regardless of their situation, are familiar with is that you end up really having to become comfortable being a learner and a curious learner of your system, your kids and the family that you have in your space, that you have to have this constant orientation or this mindset of I'm learning about each of them as they go along. And it's really a big troubleshooting situation where you've, like you said, and asking her, Stacey, how do you work that out? Well, with these 3, she's probably found some great ways to do that. But if you exchange one, everything changes. And so it's this open posture and mindset and really grace and easiness on ourselves as parents that there isn't a playbook for this or one right way to do it or something you can learn that's just going to make you better at this. It's being willing to be in the game and in it for the long game, not just the immediate. And we have to change our measuring sticks. We've changed what we measure by, and we get used to the fact that other people a lot of times are not going to get it if they're not familiar with it. And we build up a lot of resilience to that as a parent.
And Dina, I'm guessing that if we've got 2 parents, it's a 2-parent home, that one parent might be leaning in the direction of more structure and perhaps another parent is leaning in the direction of more openness. And they're going to have challenges too, trying to figure out, well, how are we going to, like one parent might be more open or take an attitude of openness and curiosity, and the other might say, no, we're going to do it this way. Is that fair to say as well? So the stress on the parents in terms of just, can you get on the same page and think about this, what's going on in a similar way? Or is it very different from each of your perspectives?
I would say absolutely it's that way. And I think it's that way in every family that has 2 parents, where there's a consistent negotiation between the 2 on how things should be. And when you start to change the dynamics of the children, we know that every time a child is added in a regular nuclear family system where 2 parents are having children, every time a child is added, it also disrupts that family system and they have to find a new balance, right? And they have to rearrange and reroute their expectations and renegotiate how things are going to go. And some of it's based on the child's personality. And this is like that on hyperdrive, where people are coming in and out at times, especially if it's a foster situation. And the children coming in and out have trauma histories and things that are coming in that are more than just adding another person, but adding someone who has needs. That can be compounded. So the complexity of the situation grows, and it definitely takes, when there's 2 parents in the home, both being willing to negotiate and work in a consistent, committed way. And that's what it is. It's really a commitment to constant change and being willing to absorb that and balance it for the sake of the children.
Yeah, and Marissa, I'm guessing we could probably do one whole video on the difference between co-parenting and solo parenting, because each has its challenges, right? Solo parenting, you don't have to negotiate, at least with your partner. You might have to negotiate with, as you were saying, the bigger system around some things. But the downside is you don't have the support unless you build it in or have fantastic neighbors or friends like Stacy, and that you've got a network.
Or friends like Marissa.
Friends like Marissa.
Because I'm a single parent and I've built it in, and Marissa
okay.
is definitely a part of that network.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and well, even in thinking about co-parenting with a spouse or solo parenting on your own, in this system, you never solo parent.